So my ideal PB&J is creamy peanut butter, grape jelly on white bread with the crust on. That's the healthy part. And that's my favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The first known PB&J was described in a Boston Cooking School magazine in 1901, and you would think it's so simple. Why would you even need to write a recipe? And the author of the article didn't really write a recipe. She just said this is a new thing. And she described these really dainty finger sandwiches that were eaten by the upper crust of Boston society, and so it was just a kind of flash in the pan at that point, and you don't really see peanut butter and jelly take off more socially across the class structure until the 30s during the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways I like to explain that is that the ingredients became industrialized. Like peanut butter became hydrogenated, so it didn't spoil, and it didn't require refrigeration. Bread got sliced in the factory, so it was easy that way. And then jelly had always been jarred, but it had been jarred by like farm wives and housewives. Now you could buy jarred jelly in the supermarket. And so those three ingredients, the fact they were industrialized, made it so that it was super easy to make. And with the Depression, with people being poor, they were looking for really high protein, high fat foods that were cheap. And PB&J fit the bill perfectly. When PB&J first became incredibly popular in the United States was with the baby boom after World War II. And there are a couple of reasons why. One is that it's easy to make, but it's not made in the store. So for housewives, and there were many American women were housewives in the 1950s, who had a lot of kids and wanted to show their love by making something for their children. This was something they could make for them, but it didn't take a long time. They didn't have to cook it, you know. So the very fact of making it was a fact of showing that they loved their kids, and that made the PB&J a perfect popular snack or lunch. Even at a time when the economy was booming, right? I said the Depression was a time when it got popular originally because peanut butter and jelly is a great kind of meal that's cheap. It still was cheap, but people didn't need cheap necessarily in the 50s. What they needed was quick. And so it was both of those things that made it great. Rise in the 30s and then rise again even more in the 50s. Because the baby boomer kids had started eating a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and when they were school age in the late 50s and early 60s, the social movements of the late 60s tended to be fueled by PB&J to the extent that the organizers of the March on Washington in 1963 recommended that everyone bring 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with them to survive the long speeches that day. And of course, the most famous speech of that day was Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. So you had literally thousands, tens of thousands of people on the mall eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches as they listened to, you know, one of the most famous speeches in American history. And I like that story as encapsulating how American the PB&J is. My hope is that it will rebound, because it is such an important part of Americana, of American family life, connecting parents like me to my kids. They connected me to my mom, who was a baby boomer herself. It connected her to her parents. And so I hope that it'll be one of those things that gets passed down, and then there's a renaissance for the PB&J.